Hello and many thanks for joining us again on the program People, Politics and Power. I am Imonia Marire. In a nation as diverse and dynamic as Nigeria, justice must not only be done but must be seen to be accessible, fair, and responsive to the lived realities of its people. Yet, for millions, the justice system remains distant, entangled in bureaucracy, weakened by corruption, and shaped by inequities that exclude the poor, women, and marginalized groups from its protection. A people centered justice system demands a fundamental shift from a system that primarily serves institutions to one that prioritizes human dignity, rights, and community well being. A cause for inclusive legal reforms, strengthened accountability mechanisms, and a justice delivery framework rooted in equity, in trust, and empowerment. In reimagining justice through the eyes of the people, Nigeria can unlock its full democratic promise, where justice becomes not a privilege for the few, but a guaranteed right for all. This is precisely what a non governmental group, the Hague Institute for Innovation of Law, otherwise known as HERE, is seeking to do by helping Nigerians to understand their justice needs and closing the justice gap. How does it intend to do this? And is this realizable? This is the focus of our discussion on the program today. And I have joining me two of my guests who are from the Hill Institute. Rachel Taylor is a justice sector advisor of Hill. Thank you so much for joining us. We're also joined by Miriam. Miriam Abba is, of course, also on the Hill Institute. She is the operations officer. Thank you so much for joining us on the program. Right. So let's begin by having perhaps an understanding of what the Nigerian justice system is at the moment and what gaps that you think ought to be filled.
Thank you very much. I have my colleague here who's the expert when it comes to data.
Okay.
I think you're aware that we've conducted data for since 2018 in Nigeria, and we just launched the last data last two days ago. Yeah, and the justice sector advisor will give us a brief
on that report.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So let's begin from that report that was presented to the public just 2 days ago.
Yeah, so we found that justice problems are extremely common for most Nigerians. The survey looked at the same group of people over 3 years annually, and we asked them questions about what their justice needs are, what problems they're facing, and also how they go about resolving those problems. We found that 90% of Nigerians are likely to face at least one legal problem in a 4-year period. So it's extremely common that Nigerians are facing problems. We also found, though, that a lot of problems do get resolved. So resolution is possible, but people often shared that they found going to courts and lawyers very expensive and very complicated processes for them. So a lot of times people instead were turning to their social network or community and traditional leaders instead to resolve their problems outside of the court system.
On what foundation did you build that finding? I mean, where did you conduct your research? How extensive was it? And how did you come to the conclusions that you have arrived at?
Yeah. It was a nationally representative survey, so we surveyed Nigerian adults across 18 states in Nigeria. We covered all 6 geopolitical zones. So we made sure to have, good representation of men and women of different age groups that match the Nigerian population. So it was an extensive survey. The first year we surveyed around 6,500 people. And because we tried to speak to the same people 3 years in a row, that number of course went down a little bit each year as people decided not to continue or maybe moved and we couldn't find them. So by the end it was around 4,000 people for the final survey after the third year.
You talked about this being geographically spread, the 6 geopolitical zones of the country. Can we talk a little bit about the states where this exercise was carried out? Say in each geopolitical zone, for instance, how many states in the north central, in northwest, in northeast, southwest, in the south-south, and the southeast, for instance?
Okay. Yeah. So what we did was, in each of the states, we don't just conduct the data. He is in the process of developing other
work. For example, in Imo State, which is one of the states where we conducted data and realized that the most pressing justice problem they have is land, family, and gender-based violence. So he didn't just stop there. When we went further, we did a stakeholder dialogue where we brought high-profile stakeholders from both the formal and informal sector in the room. We showed them the data. That's where we showed them the data of the justice problem, and they all agreed with the data that yes, indeed, this is the justice problem they are facing in the state. So in that retreat is a 3-day retreat over 9 months. Yeah, so we brought them together in the room as in a retreat form, and they identified the justice problem. I told you we had people from the formal and informal sector, and we had these discussions around people who's from traditional institutions who have resolved most of this justice problem. I think Rachel said it in the beginning that many people go to the formal sector. So it was agreed amongst the people in the room that indeed people go to the informal sector to resolve most of the justice problem. And they came up with an innovative ways of resolving the most pressing justice problem of land, family, and gender, which is high in that part of that state. We went again to the next stage, which is the Justice Innovation Lab. We brought again people in the same room to think of innovative ways to resolve those justice problems, those 3 identified most pressing justice problems in Imo State. And they came up with the Community Justice Center, which is a one-stop shop for the prevention and resolving of disputes around land, family, and GBV. Yeah, so for every state we go to, we've worked in 3 states so far. That's the Kaduna, the Ogun State, and Imo State. So for each of those states, so maybe we'll focus our discussion on those 3 states that we have projects ongoing and running. We intend to expand and do the same thing in other states that we have data. But so far, these are the 3 states. So we have an up and running community justice center in Imo State. We have staff, we have CJC staffs, we have people coming in. We've resolved over 14 cases in less than 2 months, completely resolved. We have clinic days where we have steering committee members come in every Wednesday as a clinic there. They hear and deliberate over any justice problem that somebody comes in. And to make it even work better, we have a radio station.
In Imo State?
In Imo State. It runs every Monday and Thursday. Yeah, we get people who come to the radio station, discuss their justice problem. We create awareness on the existence of the Community Justice Center. And our main focus is just to prevent the justice problem. We realize that the data showed us that many people prefer to resolve their problem amicably or even prevent a problem from occurring than going through the normal court system. So that's what we did in Imo State. We are doing the same thing in Ogun State and also Kaduna State.
I'll come back to the Ogun and Kaduna situations, but Rachel, I need you to tell us what you found in terms of the dichotomy between the formal and informal justice systems in Nigeria.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the main finding we had was that people are generally turning to informal systems to resolve their problems.
What are these informal systems?
So that would be either their social network can even count as an informal, so turning to friends and family to help them negotiate directly with the other party if they have a problem, or turning to friends and family for legal advice as well. But it can also be religious leaders, to community and traditional rulers, different figures, mainly in the community, that act as mediators often to process cases and make decisions.
Okay, so if you put that side by side with the former system, what did you find?
Yeah, we found that, I mean, people, of course, for certain problems and depending on the length of the problem, people do eventually sometimes go to courts and lawyers. So it's not that they're not using either, it's just that the paths that people are taking are more diverse than we initially thought they might be. Another really interesting finding from the study is when we went into this 3-year survey, we thought that people would probably go to their community network or their friends and family first, and then if the problem wasn't being resolved after years, then they would go to courts and lawyers. That was our hypothesis going into this. Instead, we actually found a bit of the opposite, that over time people were even less likely to turn to courts and lawyers. Oftentimes they'd already spent a lot of money on resolving the problem or had been already a complicated process, and instead they finally, after maybe 2 or 3 years of trying to resolve a problem, eventually would most likely turn to direct negotiation. So they actually said, let's not try all of these other ways anymore, let's talk face to face and try to resolve the problem between the two parties after time. So we thought that was very interesting and a different pathway than we expected.
So in effect, you are saying that people may not have enough access to the former judicial system or the former court system in resolving. They do not have enough faith in that system, either because of the complex processes or indeed the excessive cost that they have to bear. Is that what you found?
Yep, exactly. So people are often not turning to courts for those two main reasons. And so that means that that gives a broad opportunity for improvements to be made within the formal system, but then it also shows us that there's other approaches that we can also strengthen and support to make justice more accessible and affordable for people.
Was this finding, or did this finding cut across board? I mean, all the states and in all the geopolitical zones that you conducted your research?
Yes, it did. There's, of course, small differences between the geopolitical zones in particular, but that finding essentially was repeated across the country. Yeah.
So, Miriam, from your study or from your research, help us to understand what the justice needs and the experiences of the Nigerians you interacted with are.
Okay, our data showed us the justice needs from, I think, the most pressing justice problem that was identified in the data is for Imo State. I will just focus on the states that we've worked and we've seen that there is a result proven there is land. Yeah, they said that is the most pressing justice problem. And the data showed that women face a lot of problem when it comes to inheritance, to land and other related land issues. And again, we now said that family dispute is also one of the most pressing justice problem in that state, and GBV. GBV came up in our data in 2020, and I think it's because of the COVID that triggered that.
Gender-based violence.
Gender-based violence,
yes.
yeah, yeah. And I think it's because of the COVID that triggered that. You know, sometimes when you have a busy lifestyle, you go out, come back, it reduces the conflict. But I think that period that people were locked down, it triggered that data and showed that GBV was on the high rise, and especially intimate partner violence. Yeah. So that's what the data in Imo State showed us. And the same data reflected in Ogun State, but with GBV being the highest. In Imo State, the land, the family, and GBV was the second. Then it was the first two high and the land. But for Imo State, for Ogun State, GBV was the highest, followed by land and family dispute.
What did you find in Kaduna, for instance?
Kaduna, it was insecurity, crime, and police issues. That was what we found out. But for Kaduna, we only did the Justice Transformation Lab, and we intend to move to the Justice Innovation Lab, where we'll be thinking of innovative ways to resolve the problems around that 3 identified justice problems.
What's the Transformation Lab all about?
Transformation Lab is just bringing persons together in the room to transform or resolve a particular justice problem, to think of ways
Of
with
resolving
the people in mind of resolving that particular justice problem that was identified in that state. Yeah. So, but we have to focus on the people in mind. In the beginning, when we brought the people, you hear people talking about the police are trying, we have courts and everything, but when we keep on reminding there's a technique that we use. We tell them what happens to if to say you have a sister in the village, what will happen to your sister in the village who doesn't even understand the court system? So we're trying to remind them that let's forget the people in the urban area. What happens to the people in the rural area? And these people also face the same problem we face. It's just that the problem has different dynamics. So that's how we try to remind them and end up coming up with innovative ideas. What Hill does is just to create the space for them to lead. Yeah.
And I was going to come to that precisely, the fact that it appears that a lot of what you have done is urban-centered. How much of it has really permeated to the rural communities and rural people who actually need this transformation of the justice system that you talk about?
Yeah, definitely. In terms of the data itself, the rural population is equally represented. So we do make sure that we have their voices when we come to collecting the data. And when we have these justice transformation labs and justice innovation labs, we also make sure that we have a big variety of stakeholders in the room. And that also includes traditional and community leaders. And we try to have representation from rural communities as well in those situations. But it is at this moment, because of our sort of capacity and abilities, we have to, for example, the Community Justice Center is based in an urban location. And it's something we're trying to think of ways that we can sort of stretch our capacity and be able to reach more rural populations. But it's certainly something to think about because these are very important issues, and sometimes these people are not able to reach an urban center for accessing justice.
Now, I asked that question because I know that in Nigeria, and for a very long time, even more so now, the issue of affordability of the judicial system, the issue of accessibility, the issue of cost that we have talked about, and issue of fairness is much more prominent in the rural communities where people are poor, people are uneducated, and people do not have the kind of connections that people in the other people in the rural, in the urban communities have. In fact, you find in a community where there might not be even a single lawyer, right, in a rural community. And most often, all they do is go to either the traditional ruler or the community leaders with their problems. And we know that over time, even these informal sector or informal systems have become also very corrupted. And so most times they really have nowhere to fall back to, neither the formal sector nor the informal sector. And in some cases, this results in violence in communities, between families, amongst community members, and in some other cases, they then decide to resolve these matters one-on-one basis. So, what exactly are you doing to ensure that at the rural level, there's a lot more access to the legal system, whether formal and informal?
Yeah, maybe I can also, my colleague Miriam is very, very involved with this on the state-by-state level, but the Community Justice Center that we're currently operating in Imo State is a pilot project to really test out the solution and make sure that it works and is effective and is meeting people's needs. But this is already the top, one of the top challenges that is coming up out of it. and something that we will try to address when we take the center forward and scale it to reach more communities outside of the urban area. But maybe if you have anything you want to add.
Yes, Miriam.
The Community Justice Center is in the rural area. That's what we did. But it's in the pilot phase. So the plan is to have kiosks in all these local governments. We have community justice representatives who go into these local government rural areas to create awareness. And the intention is after the pilot phase, we'll have kiosks, like a kiosk kind of setting in all those rural areas with our community justice representatives present there. Yeah, that's the plan. And the unique thing we did for Ogun State again is realize that people who face gender-based violence, in our research, it showed us that people who face gender-based violence go to the primary health care center first. So what we did was we have our one-stop shop for the survivors of gender-based violence at the primary health care center. It's called EB Isadi. A place of refuge, that's the meaning of the word. And it's in the primary health care center. Why? Because research showed us that many people from the rural areas have access to this primary health care center. So we make sure we station the EB Sadi at the primary health care center.
So that's an effort at addressing the issue of access.
Yeah. As we said earlier, our focus is on the people. So we are people-centered, and we realize that people from the rural areas lack meaningful access. So we brought that innovation at the rural area, at the primary health care center. That way, a person facing a GBV problem wouldn't have to go to the clinic, get treated, go to the police, explain to the police, move to another, telling your stories over and over and over again. And sometimes we found out that in our research, we found out that people lose interest and end up staying within that toxic environment. But if you're able to come to the primary health care center, we have a referral system where we will refer you. Your story is already there. You don't have to repeat it over and over again. We refer you to the right person. And we do this in collaboration with the Ministry of Justice of Ogun State, Ministry of Women Affairs. Yeah, so that's what we do.
If I might add just one point to that, it's that is a perfect example of why data is so important. Because without the data, we wouldn't have known where women were going when they had a problem, when they had a gender-based violence problem, and we wouldn't have been able to meet them where they're already going.
Yeah. So flowing from that, what would you say, or who would you say are the most impacted by the legal problems that we talk about now?
We found that vulnerable groups tend to be the most impacted. So women, poor, different marginalized groups, lower income groups, lower education. So we found, exactly that these are the groups that are most impacted and often have the least access to justice.
And most of these people are in the rural communities.
Indeed.
So when you are able to, say, for instance, Miriam, you talked about having to locate your center in the health center in the rural community, when you have been able to incident or record the case, who do you refer to? How do you move from there? Or how does the individual concerned, the victim, move from there? Do you pass the case on to the police, or do you pass the case straight on to the Ministry of Justice, for instance, to take it up? And have you at any time have to encounter situations where this is, let's say, GBV, gender-based violence, where the victims will come back and say, I want to discontinue. I do not want to proceed with this. Maybe as a result of family pressures, community pressure, and all of that.
Yeah, we've encountered such a problem. Yeah. The reason why the person wanted to discontinue is a story we had from the Ministry of Women Affairs. The reason is because she said she keeps on telling her stories over and over and over again. They'll tell her she has to go to the police. So what we did now, it's not just the primary health care center. That is the situation. That's the station for the one-stop shop. But we have a desk office at the Ministry of Women Affairs. We have another desk office at the Ministry of Justice. We have a desk office at the police station, yeah, the gender unit of the police station. We have desk office. And again, he went further to assist with an online application where if I file my case at the Women Affairs, let's say that's where the victim, the survivor goes to file his case, that same case will reflect in all other places. So you don't have to tell your stories over and over again. If you have been referred to the police, all they need to do is you just state your referral number. We call it a referral number. And the police have all the details on the system. They have all the details on the system. They know who and who was involved. If it has to do with maybe arrest or restraining.
But that's in places where the police have such facility to access that kind of information.
Yeah, that's why we place it at the gender unit, because every case that has to do with GBV goes to the gender unit departments at the police station. So we have a kiosk there, we have a desk office there, and they have the system, they have everything set up for them, so they get to get the information. So you don't have to go to the clinic, go back to the Ministry of Women Affairs. If they need a restraining order, it's already at the police. We're even at the stage trying to work together with Honorable Justice Ogunfowara and the Chief Justice of High Court to be able to also give judgment, as in summary judgment, to help us so that if a case has to go to court, we don't have to take that long period of time. Because we've also worked on training people. Another thing we did was we realized that many of these people refer to their traditional, religious, or family heads to resolve their justice problem. We developed guidelines. And we trained over 1,000 persons in Ogun State on the use of family and land guidelines.
These are the 3 states you are using as pilot states. Imo, Ogun, Kaduna.
Yeah.
Now, so, I mean, what are your plans for expansion? Because Nigeria is a very big country. 36 states, and you are just doing only 3 now. So, what are the plans for expansion? How do you want to reach more people, particularly in the rural areas?
Yeah, I mean, we would love to expand to other states. We'd also love to work more at a federal level as well to reach more people in more states. Of course, it comes a lot down to funding challenges because it's important that we are able to get funding to expand to other states. Unfortunately, as a non-governmental organization, this is one of the challenges that we often face. Miriam, is there anything you want to add about?
Yeah, I think for example, for the guideline that we're trying to develop, the stakeholders in Imo State reviewed the guideline we developed for Ogun State, and they found it interesting and they were ready to adapt it. We had, our CEO was here, I think, 2 weeks ago, and he had meetings with high-profile persons from the Ministry of Justice, that's the Attorney General of the Federation, and I think the Governors Forum. I think those people have interest in seeing how there will be collaboration between the Hill and those.
Yeah, I was just going to talk about collaboration.
Yeah. So
there are a number of institutions or agencies of government that probably work on issues like this, like the National Human Rights Commission, and maybe the Ministry of Justice, as you say, the Ministry of Women Affairs and all of that.
Yeah.
How much collaboration are you envisaging with this? We also know that in some states and in some localities, Legal Aid Council is also available for people who do not have what it takes to access the legal system. These agencies of government, how much are you doing with them?
We've been working with the Legal Aid Council, the FIDA, Ministry of Justice for over 5 years now. Yeah, we've been working with them. Well, at that point, we wanted to have a proof of concept, prove that we've gone to a state level and this is what has worked. So I think we had a meeting with the National Judicial Institute, and they showed 100% interest in our guidelines. I told you we developed 2 guidelines for Ogun State, and we are trying to develop 3 other guidelines for Imo State. And they showed interest. They want us to be part of the annual training for judges. Yeah, to just create awareness on referral system and trying to prevent the justice problem, to reduce the workload on the court. Because we at Hill believe in preventive measures and also supportive measures to the formal sector. So there's discussion ongoing around that area, yeah, and I think the Legal Aid Council director also spoke during our lunch, and he acknowledged that we've been working together, and he wants us to, now that we have data, and we've concluded the data, and they are not arguing that the data is what actually is the justice problem. And one unique thing is we are the only ones who have data on justice in Nigeria. Because
Really?
yeah, Nigerian Bureau of Statistics said that we are the only persons who have data on justice problems in Nigeria. So even the Nigerian Bureau of Statistics are ready to, we are looking forward to collaborating with them in the future to also adapt our data as a policy for Nigeria. Yeah.
So, talking about data, let's talk more about data now. What was your finding in terms of data as to why and how cases that may have been resolved resurface over time? Does your data show you anything to back that up? Particularly with these 3 categories of legal problems that you have identified.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the good news is that we found that the majority of problems that are resolved stay resolved. So it's not a huge percentage of problems that are resurfacing after resolution, and typically if they're going to resurface, it's within the first year afterwards. So that is a positive finding, that resolutions are tending to last. But the types of problems that were resurfacing most often were also these most common these most common categories. So land, neighbor problems, family problems. And that sort of makes sense in a way, because they're also the problems that you're probably living with close by to the other party, or you're facing them again over time, even after being resolved. And we also wanted to know the types of resolution processes that then didn't last necessarily, or types of processes that then the problem was resurfaced. And overwhelmingly, that was direct negotiation. So when people resolved the problem directly with the other party, those were the most likely to then resurface later on. We also, with this last survey, did some qualitative interviews. So we spoke to people in depth to hear about their experiences, and these interviews also supported exactly what the data showed. So we had examples of people who maybe resolved a land dispute by negotiating with the other party, and they thought the problem was resolved, everything was okay, and then a year later, the other party then took the problem to maybe the customary court. So then all of a sudden they're back in a dispute resolution process with this issue, so it's back in their lives. And we also asked people why they think their problems resurfaced, so why they think that the problems, the resolutions didn't last. And most often people said that it's because the initial resolution didn't address the root cause of the problem. So maybe it addressed a surface level issue, but didn't really get to the root cause, and as a result, it kept coming back up again. And the other main reason was that the resolution was partial or temporary, which we think might be part of this connected to the direct negotiation, because it's sort of a temporary resolution to the problem, but doesn't necessarily have a formal element attached to it, or it's not necessarily enforceable, so then as a result, the problem can come back again.
It's a known fact that legal problems linger for a very long time in Nigeria. Did you find out why that is so? Will you see cases that go to court, even from the customary court to the magistrate, to the high court, to the federal court, and then as far as sometimes to the Supreme Court?
Yeah, exactly. We had many people tell us that they had problems lingering for, in this case, we studied a 4-year period, but people did tell us about problems that were lasting for 10 years, 20 years, and oftentimes that was because of long court processes or, yeah, people going to different sources of help constantly, trying one mechanism for maybe a year, trying another, and it just ends up taking a very long time, and the problem continues to linger and cause a lot of impacts on people's lives. People told us that they experience stress and mental health issues, physical health issues, as a result of these problems lingering in their lives.
So, what are the realities of everyday legal problems in Nigeria from your findings?
Maybe I'll take this one from our findings. Let me, whenever I'm speaking, I have to like refer to where we have
Yes.
real life events. From our findings in Imo State, especially for family and GBV dispute, we realize just like what Rachel has said, the root cause. They don't identify the root cause of the problem. So the problem is usually resolved at the surface level. Then you end up seeing one family dispute problem having different ingredients. And it has gone to court and just one of those ingredients was resolved. So the guideline, the people we trained on the guideline, we trained them on the onion conflict model. It's one of the recommendations in the guideline, where you know how the onion looks like? We train them on how to peel each layer of the onion to be able to reach the last layer of the onion. So if you're trying to resolve a justice problem, it's in the guideline. You listen to one party, make sure you use the onion conflict model, the communication techniques, it's all in the guideline. You listen to parties differently so that you'll be able to identify because sometimes one person's problem, it's the same problem they're facing, two parties facing the same problem, but you're just only trying to identify solution for just one party. But if you use the onion conflict model, you'll be able to identify the root cause of the problem and be able to reach a resolution. So that's the guideline has all these communication techniques, onion conflict model, the model used to identify justice problems. We have all those recommendations in the guideline, and I told you we've trained people from both the formal and even informal sectors, because the guideline is practically for practitioners. And we've trained so many traditional rulers who we've known resolve these two problems on a day-to-day basis.
And from your experience, you think that those you have trained are doing enough or are doing well in the resolution of these problems?
Yeah, they are doing well. Because we don't just...
Can you put a percentage to that? I mean, say over a period of 1 or 2 years, for instance.
Okay, maybe I will go back to Imo State, where we have problems that have been resolved at the Community Justice Center. Because the Imo State CJC has been up and running for almost 3 months now. And we're just trying to get to the second one for the Ogun State. We have a steering committee. The steering committee have people representative from the government sector, and we have traditional and even religious members at the steering committee. And I told you we have a clinic day. In that clinic day, we discuss what problems have resolved. There was a problem that has been lingering for almost 7 years, and it was resolved at the Community Justice Center by the traditional rulers. By a traditional ruler. He was present at the lunch. It was resolved. He said he didn't even understand the justice problem, but with the training and everything and the presence of the CJC, he was able to listen to both parties and resolve that justice problem amicably. It has to do with a land issue. Both parties had interest in the land, but one party wanted to take the land, and he was able to resolve that problem. The parties divided the land. It's a family issue. They divided the land. One part takes the other, and the other part takes the other, and that's how he was able to resolve the justice problem. But from the beginning, he thought maybe it's just let's give the right owner of the land. So many people prefer to speak, which they don't get the opportunity sometimes. So if you listen to both parties, you're able to get to a resolution. We've recorded so many cases that have been, there were almost 14 resolved cases in less than 3 months.
So how is the HEAL initiative different from what we have always known in Nigeria as the multi-door court system?
Yeah, so I mean, One of the big differences, at least for the Community Justice Center, is that it's completely free to access. So there's no cost to the people coming to resolve their justice problems. And we did this based on the data, right? Because people told us that oftentimes accessing justice was just too expensive for them. And so based on that, we decided that this had to be a free model for people to access. And the idea generally that we're using this people-centered approach means that people, sometimes if they want a resolution that is just, or sometimes a resolution for them is just talking through the problem directly with the other party in the presence of a leader or a mediator. Sometimes that's all people need when they have a problem. They need to just, talk through it. So the idea that we don't necessarily go directly, we don't refer always to litigation, to court. The approach is really about what does this person need to get their justice problem resolved and to continue with their life in a satisfactory way. And the approach is really centered around that. So it's only what people need to live their lives and move forward. And that is really a sort of a more unique approach and what the core of people-centered justice really is.
Will the model remain free over time? I asked that question because, I mean, you run a system, you have employees, you incur cost. Mm-hmm. How do you fund this initiative if the model remains free?
Yeah, this is a very big question. It's a big challenge because the goal is that it remains free, and I think that's the intention. But we have to find sustainable ways to finance it and still provide free services, and not put too much burden on the people providing the services at the center as well, because it does take their time to be there, and they often are offering pro bono services to be there. So we are finding different innovative ways to finance these solutions, looking at different options from organizations coming together to fund, maybe government funding, international funding. So I don't have a direct answer yet, but it's something we're trying to explore, really innovative ways to finance this and keep it free and available to everyone.
Because, Miriam, as you expand your initiative across the country, the cost becomes very huge.
Yeah.
And how do you intend to bridge that gap if it remains free?
Okay. We've thought of this question even before going into the pilot phase. For Imo State, we are partnering with a local NGO, Nkemjika Development Foundation. He gave us the building. So, and we are at the pilot phase. And the plan is, if we are going to step back, Nkemjika Development Foundation is ready to continue. Yeah. And in Ogun State, we are working with the Ministry of Women Affairs, I told you, the Nigerian Police, and the Ministry of Justice. So the staff of the CJC are the staff of those ministries. So, yeah, so if at all Hill is going to, and from the beginning I also said, Hill is just here to create the space for you to take charge of the space. So if at all we are stepping back, we tried two different models, partnering with an NGO and partnering with a government institution. This is also an initiative to see which one works better. Yeah. So the staff at the Ogun State one-stop shop has one secondment. They are the staff of the ministries that we are working with.
Of the Ogun State government?
Yes, Ministry of Women Affairs, Ministry of Justice, and the gender unit of the police.
So if you find that viable, is it likely that you will introduce it also in other states of the country?
Yeah, I told you we are at the pilot phase. If we are trying to compare the two processes to see which one works.
One is private sector driven,
and one is
public sector driven.
Yeah, whichever one stands on its 2 feet after the pilot phase, we take that model and apply it all around.
Well, what model are you applying in Kaduna State, for instance?
In Kaduna State, I told you we just finished the Justice Transformation Lab, and we are planning to go into the Justice Innovation Lab, and it's in partnership with the state government.
Okay, so the public sector model again that we're looking at.
Yeah, so when we finish the pilot phase of these two baby states that we're working with, whichever one works, and whichever one we see that is the best process, then
we think towards that when
The
we're going
issue
to
of
Kaduna.
sustainability will come in because you know that in Nigeria,
Yeah.
when government changes, policies change, their application change,
Yeah.
for instance.
Yeah.
So if another government comes in and does not fancy your initiative, it may just drop out. What do you do in that instance? And that's where I'm coming from
Yeah,
in terms of sustainability of this initiative.
Okay, in every state that we work, we try as much as possible to get someone who is in the private sector space, who is part of the stakeholders. And we've seen interest, we've seen people having interest, for example, Mr. Mike Ikoku of Nkemjika Development Foundation, who gave us the building, and that's where we have the CJC. We have people like that in the room as part of the stakeholders. So whichever way that works, we just have like a plan A and plan B. Whichever one that works, we pick that as the best option.
What are your hopes and expectations as far as this initiative is concerned in closing the justice gap in Nigeria?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we're already seeing some success with the way the Community Justice Center is working, and so we hope that it's able to resolve more people's justice problems in a quick, affordable, quality way. And that's the key to closing the justice gap, right? So people's problems aren't lingering, they're not getting new problems as old problems linger, but really when they have a problem, they're able to reach quality services and resolve their problem quickly and move on with their lives, and that would help to decrease the justice gap. And then of course also with hopefully prevention, so using things like the radio station and general awareness. We hope that also by helping to prevent problems, we'll also work to decrease the justice gap as well.
Do you intend, you cannot replicate, say, the Imo State model where you have where you run a radio station twice a week or the other. You cannot expect to replicate that in every other state where you're going to work. But are you thinking of partnerships with media organizations in any of these states, in the local areas?
Yeah.
For instance, in order to drive your message home and to bring the people to embrace this initiative that you're putting forward?
Yeah, I think we've tried that model just in Imo State with the radio station, and I think it's making an impact. Because in the radio station, it's not just about the CJC. We speak about the CJC. We invite people who speak about preventive measures in most of this justice problem that people face. And we've seen a lot of impact. So it's a model, I think, that we can replicate, and Hill is looking forward to partnering or collaborating with other radio stations or TV stations to create awareness, because I told you the focus is prevention. We see justice as a commodity, not as a necessity, so we try as much as possible to prevent most of this justice problem. So prevention, we see radio, TV station, creating awareness on radio and TV station as a preventive measures. Many people don't even know they are facing a justice problem. They see it as usual lifestyle. Some people don't even know that they're in a justice problem. So if you're creating awareness on stuff like that, I think it goes a long way.
So, well, finally, Miriam, as we round up our discussion, is he thinking of, for instance, having to take on the very present and current issues of conflicts in communities like, say, in Plateau, in Benue, in Nasarawa, where you have farmer herders, conflicts, and all of that? Is that an area that he will want to look at?
Yeah, I think we have a team of an amazing research team in the office who have done research on farmer-herder conflict in Niger, and it's an area we are ready because we've worked in Kaduna State, and the justice problem that was identified is security. So if we can have an innovative way of resolving a security problem, we can replicate it. Just like I've told you, what we did in Ogun State, the guideline on family and land dispute is being adapted in Imo State. So we are trying to do that for Kaduna State, and we can adapt it in other states, because most of those states face similar justice problem. And the guideline is just internationally recognized best practice and interviews. So for the research work is the same all over. The only difference is when you come to the best practice, where you have to go to the field and interview those people. So I think Hill is up to the task to do that.
So Rachel, one last word here.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we found from the research and from what we've been doing in Nigeria is that the importance of people-centered data is really the key to all of these initiatives. If we don't know what people's needs are, if we don't know where they go when they have a problem, then we can't meet them there. We can't help them to resolve those problems in the way that they need and works for them. And so data is really at the core of what we do at Hill, and that was really seen in the launch of the Justice Needs and Satisfaction Report this week, and is important to go forward and to continue collecting data and understanding what's happening in real time and what people's needs are.
Thank you so much. Rachel Taylor is a Justice Sector Advisor here, and Miriam Abba is the Operations Officer of here. Well, of course, it appears to me that up to now, and as more and more people get to know about the work you do, you might be getting a lot on your plate or in your hands to deal with, because there are legal problems, legal issues, and disputes at almost every level in Nigeria. So you should be bracing up for a lot more. Thank you so much for your time on the program today. Right, that's it for us today. Join us again when we bring you a fresh edition of People, Politics, and Power. Thank you so much for investing your time with us. Bye for now.